Welcome to the channel, Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist. We're going to talk resolve and betrayal. Resolve and betrayal. People who don't want to resolve, that are in unresolved, are giving you the first sign of betrayal. Okay? There's no balancing unresolved in a relationship. The pressure, the dynamic behind it, the stress that it'll cause the other person will cause them to micro-incrementally, emotionally remove themselves from the relationship, be it in an emotional affair or some other way in which they're being self-soothed to exit the relationship. Now that's how it works. When somebody's challenged to bring resolve, and it's not necessarily them that need to bring it, but it could be a family member, it could be anything like that, and they can't find it, that's going to cause a stress, a pressure that weak people usually aren't able to deal with. You see, if a family member's interfering in your relationship and you can't sort it out, that's an element of unresolved, and that's a matter of stress and pressure. Now, two compounds here equal exit. First one is the weakness, right, of the fact that the person can't find resolve. They cannot confront the issue. The issue being a person in the family that has control or manipulation over them. It could be a friend. It could be an emotional affair going on at work. It could be 100 different combinations, but the point being is, the fact of the matter is, the unresolved has been identified. The person where it's coming from has been identified. The problem has been identified, and the partner is choosing not to confront the issue. That's the first sign of emotionally exiting the relationship. Now, they might be physically turning up for the sex, for the ego stroking, for the attention, but emotionally, incrementally, micro-incrementally, dark empath reaction, they're slowly checking out, man. It doesn't matter if it takes 1 month, 1 week, 6 months, 12 months. Unresolved, listen to what I'm talking about, is going to bring that person to exit. They're going to have to find a soothe somewhere outside the relationship. Okay? The pressure of the unresolved, the fact that they haven't got the strength to bring the unresolved relative to a control factor or a manipulation factor or a soul tie or a maternal tie or bond, will bring evidence to the fact that they are going to exit the relationship on you, because you're going to get the blame for those people and their soul tie and their destructive soul tie against the relationship, right? It's destructive. You can don't pretend with this shit. It's real. It's dark empath behavior. It's prevalent throughout our communities where partners are sharing personal details of the relationship, grievances and all this shit that you don't know anything about, right? With people outside the relationship, usually the person that's causing the trouble, right? Okay? And it'll grow. If the person's not bringing resolve to the issue, I promise you, right, by experience, I've seen this several times and had people that I've had to counsel and unravel the bullshit that they've gone through several times. It will be an outside influence through an emotional affair-like attachment that will undermine the relationship micro-incrementally through dark triad behavior, and they'll emotionally slide out of the relationship, and you'll sense this. There's usually going to be some kind of numbing through medication, through alcohol, through drugs, or all the combined, right? They'll be coming for sex and getting soothed that way, only out of conscience. It's just a matter of time before they're going to jump the fence. And as they're setting up the second person or the second form of supply, right, and building the confidence and trust in that, until they're absolutely assured that it's safe to pull the pin. This is how it works, because they're finding the self-soothing from the unresolved through that new connection, right? And this can build off the family member and shift into a stranger, because they migrate the pressure and the stress of the unresolved, right? They'll migrate it. You've probably never heard of all this stuff, but it happens all the time. They'll build confidence through someone they can trust by complaining and carrying on about the partner, etc., to find justification for not bringing resolve. This is dark triad behavior, sabotaging behavior, right? All done covertly against the person that they love, because weak people who can't find resolve are the ones that normally opt for an affair. Now, the reason for this is they get soothing. They'll entertain these people that run around destroying families all the time. These people seem to pop up just at the right time to listen to the rubbish and the garbage of the person that doesn't want to resolve. It's usually stories based on justification around the fact that they didn't want to resolve. They're not going to tell the person the truth. They're going to make themselves feel justified for jumping the fence by sabotaging the character and personality of the person that they're in bed with. And once they've done that, and they have the opportunity to physically opt out of the relationship through sexual relations with somebody else, you'll be dropped. Now, they'll sleep with two people at once while they're transitioning. They'll be sleeping with you out of familiarity, just to keep up a check on themselves, possibly to make sure that they're performing right. I've had partners ask me how they're sexually going and all the rest of it while they've been transitioning into another relationship. Oh, they're good at how they do it. It's funny, actually. And then you'll know that they're having sex with somebody else. You're just waiting for the right time to catch them in the moment, or through circumstance. And they're asking you questions about their performance, what they look like, what they feel like. Strange questions, which normally you'd accommodate. But as you learn to realize that there's more going on than what is normal, they're checking to make sure that if they transition and pull the plug on you, everything's going to be all right, because they can't ask a stranger these questions. See, you're building their confidence to jump ship. You're sabotaging yourself if you haven't got your senses about you. Now, I have watched by experience and gone along with these transitions just to see if I was on the right track. And I was. And sure enough, there was somebody in the background that they were self-soothing with because they wouldn't resolve the issue. Now, none of this was your fault, right? The problem didn't start with you. The problem didn't come from you. But because the person that you're with is weak, they don't know how to shut down the troublemaker, because they're emotionally in bed with them as well through possibly covert emotional incest or some kind of sibling incest. Like, there's family incest on the emotional level across the board, right? If that person cannot shut the other person down, the unresolved that's attacking them through the bond of that person, right, by spirit, will undermine the relationship until the other person has to self-soothe outside the relationship, and you will pay the price if you haven't got your senses about you. Another sign is in the bedroom, and they'll start not wanting to do the normal things that they do. They'll start to retract. They'll start to not be adventurous because they're now shifting that side of their life across to somebody else. I'm sorry if this is confronting, but it's true, because it all starts emotionally. They start to withdraw emotionally. They're making the transition out. Right? They're transitioning out. They're getting soothed somewhere else. The problem's not yours. The problem's being caused by these people that you're with. Right? They emotionally transition out. They're physically in still, just supplying you enough to keep you on board while they're making sure the other side's going to work out okay. It could even be an ex. Like, I'm just going to the point of using the example of a stranger, but if it's an ex, they're already in bed with the ex. Right? They're just trying to soften the blow on you. They've found their band-aid. And this behaviour will repeat itself. It's happened before you come along. You'll often hear these women go, oh, my ex-husband or my ex had an affair, but I was talking to somebody else but nothing happened. Usually that's a lie. Usually they're projecting what they've done onto the ex-partner to keep you unaware of what the capabilities of this person relative to moving into an affair are. That's why it's covert. That's why it's called covert emotional affairs and incest. You don't know what's going on. These people are sharing personal information of the relationship with children in their family, adult children. They're sabotaging the relationship left, right and centre. Good on you, love. They're undermining the relationship while they're transitioning out. They're physically turning up. If you were a fly on the wall, you would probably fall off the wall dead and kicking your feet on your back, unable to fly. I know this sounds terrible, but it's true, because if they're not resolving a problem with somebody in their house, that means they're emotionally on side with that person. So if that person's got grievances with you, then they're going to have to share in the same grievances and probably share theirs, whatever they are, because you won't know. That's how this works. That's how this immaturity works. And it happens every day. And you need to be aware of how this dark triad micro-incremental behaviour works. You can be physically in a relationship with somebody and they're emotionally not there. And if they're having an emotional affair with somebody else, it's only a matter of time before they cross over. I remember a couple of girls said, oh, I didn't have an affair, but I was emotionally connected to a man at work. Oh, I bet you they did have the affair. 100%. 100%. And they've projected that onto the partner and blame them to justify their own weaknesses. You see, weak people that don't resolve things, they're not going to hang around. They'll stay for a while, but when it just gets too tough, when the problem's coming from within, from their side, and they're in bed with that person emotionally, be it a child or whatever, and they can't stop it, and you're on them for it, right? It's over. They're going to betray you. Eventually they're going to betray you. There's just no other way they can go, because they're not going to be able to soothe any other way. To shut down the unresolved, they'll micro-incrementally shift emotionally out but stay physically in until it's time to jump ship. That's how it works. It's just how it works. And it's progressive. As I keep saying, it's micro-incremental. And if you're not aware of this brilliance, it's absolute brilliance, the way in which it works. I'm telling you, the evil magnificence of it, right? The way in which it can camouflage itself and still satisfy itself under your sheets and in your house while it's emotionally shifting out of your authority is unsurpassed. People are deceived by this evil transitional behavior every day, right? Every day, because it can take months for it actually to come off. They might meet 2 or 3 people. It might take 2 or 3 people for it to come off. They could meet somebody and finally get a one-nighter under the sheets with that person and not see that person again, so they have to restart. You won't know about this. You'll know by the unresolved. If you're not acting on the unresolved, then you're allowing all this to happen to you. You have to act on the unresolved. That's the key. The emotional withdrawal and all that other stuff, that's so well camouflaged, 9 times out of 10 you won't know what's going on. You'll even ask yourself, who's that person emotionally connecting with? Who are they connecting with? I've asked them, knowing all too well that there's somebody on the outside, and knowing all too well that they're not going to tell you that. That's how it works. You see, unresolved opens up such a massive micro-incremental dark triad calamity, right? The brilliance of it all. The human nature, fallen human nature, just seems to be able to work this thing so well until they've solidified themselves with somebody else. You will not get the hammer. All right, you will not get they will not chop you up, because there's conscience involved in this as well. While it's unconscionable, there's also conscious involved in this as well. And I tell you, if there's drugs and alcohol involved, it's even more lethal, because they're running on deep hyper accelerated and intense fallen human nature lusts and desires, because that's what drugs do. They accelerate anger, they accelerate lust, they accelerate all the human positive and negative attributes in a way in which they're not rational. They're not fully rational. They're only working in that moment, right? They're momentary. They're not circulating and responding normally at a normal mental cycle, because they're being disrupted by the substances and things. That's why these people are dangerous. Because if somebody comes along, if they're in this state of PMO, physically in and mentally out, it only takes the right person to come along at the right time and they're out. And you won't even know. You'll just be left standing there going, what the fuck happened? If you haven't got your spiritual discernment and wits about you. Right? You can see these micro incremental shifts if you have your wits about you. But if you haven't, you're at the mercy of, unfortunately, all the consequences of this kind of evil. And this is why people never recover. They're in mental homes. Some people never go back into a relationship, because the catastrophic psychological damage that this causes, the surprise, the elements of and consequences of betrayal, the concept of being betrayed, the reality of being betrayed, impacts so deeply and so heavily that these people just don't recover. Also, some of these people that fall into the dark triad, betrayal, micro-incremental journey. For example, Judas, he hung himself when after betraying the Lord. He took the money. He was actually, a lot of people don't realise this, but he was the scapegoat for all the disciples. They wanted Christ to raise his hand against the Romans. They saw his power, they saw his miracles, and they thought if they could just put him in a situation where he'd have to strike back, that he would. But if you read the Gospels very carefully, when they turned up and they said, "Which one's Christ?" They said, "Which one's Christ?" He said, "I am." They all fell backwards. The Romans and the Jews. They all fell backwards on the ground. And Christ, right? Christ was then taken away. He was then taken away. And you'll see that Peter and James were told not to take swords with them at this time, but they did. They took the swords with them, and Peter actually chopped off the high priest's servant ear roll. Peter the disciple, he actually chopped off the high priest's servant's ear, and Christ put it back on. So they weren't supposed to have swords, but they did, and Christ had to heal that high priest servant's ear. He put his ear back on in the middle of all this. So I'm telling you this because Judas was just a scapegoat for the rest of the disciples, and that's why Judas hung himself, and he was found with his guts on the ground, hanging from a tree, because he was set up by his mates to betray Christ. But it was just not going to happen the way that they thought, because it was all part of God's plan. And sometimes these women and men that fall into these traps of betrayal, micro-incremental, dark triad betrayal, just progressively, emotionally moving out, physically staying in. Some of these people don't recover either. Some of these people commit suicide as well because of their consciousness of betrayal. They've betrayed, apparently, somebody that believed they were in love with. And usually these people don't normally produce anything positive in their lives, because the weakness and the way in which they deal with things doesn't allow them to. That's why the Bible says, "He who's faithful in little things will be also faithful in much." And weak people just aren't really able to be faithful in anything, because when the floods come and the winds blow and the rain falls, as Jesus said, they'll be washed away, because their foundation's not founded on the principles at work of resolve and transparency and confronting the issue. You'll find too, these people will say things like, "Oh, I can't talk to you about anything because you get angry," yet you don't get angry. It's an excuse for not wanting to look at the issue. They don't want to. It's an excuse. They don't want to face the issue. "Oh, I can't talk to you because you get all upset." And you stand there and you're thinking, upset? We haven't even started anything yet. And that's that way of avoiding what needs to be dealt with. Dark, triad, micro-incremental, PMO, exit from relationship. You have to be aware of this. You generally won't spot it if you're on drugs or alcohol. You really have to have a high sensorial perception of where your partner's at. so that you can make right judgments on these things, because you just don't want to be paranoid. It's not a matter of being suspicious of everything your partner does. It's a matter of reading their behaviour, right? They're unresolved. Remember, unresolved's the foundation to the beginning of the end, right? That's when you start taking a close look at what's going on. As I said, it could take 1 month, it could take 10 months. It might not even like, you might just go, oh, I'm sick of this. But at some point, the person, the weak person, the spineless person without a backbone, they're going to go. And they're going to go at your expense. And they're going to go on their own weaknesses, not yours. And you have to be aware of it. You have to be able to have the courage and strength to go, you need to leave, or I'm out. You have to. Because they're dangerous, they're damaging, and if you look at their history, which they're not going to tell you, it's repeated behaviour. And if you think, and let me just tell you this, you survivors, right, that are listening to this, if you think the next person that they're going to be with is going to be better off than what you were, you are wasting your time and your space and your thoughts on a delusion. It doesn't get better. If you were playing all your right parts in that relationship, if you were trying as best as you could to be tolerant and understanding and being a good partner for that person, right, in the bedroom as well, and it just didn't come off, that person ain't going to somewhere better. It's just not going to be better. It'll be worse. And you'll see that person, maybe, hopefully you won't, but if you do, and they'll be somebody with somebody, and you'll cringe. You'll go, what the hell? I've seen it. And every one of the 6 women that I've known that have done this, I'm telling you the truth, they've all ended up alone. All of them. They've been fucked here and there, I'm sorry, but they've been fucked here and there, and they've ended up having to shut shop because they didn't manage themselves correctly. They just didn't manage their lives correctly. And you can't do that. It doesn't work. Nobody gets away with that kind of behaviour. It just doesn't work. So really, this is serious stuff, because a lot of people, this happened to a lot of people during COVID. It happens to a lot of people during normal life. But you have to realise, weak people that don't want to resolve obvious issues, they're going to take you out through their weakness. And the person, if it's triangulated, that they're in cahoots with, will be accommodating that, and they'll work your partner until they're gone. Be aware, read the signs. You'll also too, if they are known to be an alcoholic or a drug addict, you'll see that their intake will get more to try and numb their conscience more. And they might even push in closer to you to try and numb their conscience as well. But they're gone. They're emotionally out and in with somebody else. None of it was your fault. It was their weakness. Beat it. Be strong. Keep your identity. Stay fit. Keep your mind. Don't worry about any smear campaigns or anything. Just help people to understand how evil works, because it's around us all the time, and it's usually the poor, the people that we get involved with aren't what we thought. They're just not strong enough to deal with the things that matter in a relationship, and they'll stay that way for the rest of their life. Reverend Dr. J.W. Morrison, out.